So this isn't going to be a reading, but I wanted to talk about a few things that I forgot to mention as I was reading through the baptism of Christ and his temptations and the preaching of John the Baptist and all that going on. The first thing that I forgot to talk about a little bit was in both Luke and John we get this idea. And well, let's read this again. Luke chapter 3 verse 15 says, "And as the people were in expectation, and all men mused in their hearts of John, whether he were the Christ or not." They were in expectation. And remember, in John, they actually interrogate John the Baptist. And they ask him, "Are you Christ?" He says, "No." "Are you Elias?" He says, "No." "Are you that prophet?" He says, "No." Why are they asking him these questions? It's because the Jews knew that Christ was coming. It wasn't just some vague prophecy, oh, he'll be coming sometime. No, they were expecting him. They knew he was coming at this time. That's also why there were so many women named Mary, because they knew that the mother of Christ was going to be named Mary. And so as the time approached for the coming of Christ, everybody was naming their daughters Mary in the hope that their daughter would be the mother of Christ. They were looking forward to it. And when John came preaching, a lot of people were wondering, is this Christ? Has he come at last? And John has to say, no, I'm not him, but he is coming. He will be here shortly. He's actually, in John, in the Gospel of John, he even says he's actually already here. He is living among you, and you don't recognize him. But the Jews knew Christ was coming. And there was the star that proclaimed his birth. Now, there was, as we read, well, it wasn't seen by everybody. The wise men followed the star. But others had to ask the wise men when the star appeared, because if they did see it, they didn't recognize it. But some people likely did see and recognize the star. And then we had this story, the wise men had come asking about the birth of Christ. The shepherds had talked about his birth. They told people about the visitation of the angels. All this stuff had been happening. The people were ready for it. They were looking for Christ. The problem is most of them were looking for a military leader who would break off the yoke of Rome and liberate the people into a free nation again. But they were looking for Christ. They all knew that this was the time for Christ to come. Now the other thing I want to mention here, and I can't remember exactly where I first heard this. Pretty sure it was one of the apostles talking about this. But what happened during those 40 days that he was fasting in the wilderness? We read after he was baptized, the Spirit brought him into the wilderness, and he fasted for 40 days, and he was with God. The Father was there with him. What was going on? Well, from my understanding, and as I say, I'm pretty sure I heard this from one of the apostles, but I can't remember exactly, but I like the idea. And so I'm going to present this just as speculation because I can't verify it as a authentic doctrine of the church. But we know that Christ experienced everything that we experience. He had to. He experienced every pain, every emotional hurt, every physical injury, everything. What we don't consider is that when we talk about him experiencing everything, this would also include he had to experience the veil of mortality. So when he was born as a mortal, even though he was only half mortal, his father was God, he still had the veil over his mind so that he could not remember who he was before he was born, just like the rest of us. He had to grow and learn just like the rest of us. He even describes this in John and in Matthew. He grew in honor among men and God. No man could teach him, but he still grew. He still had to learn. He wasn't learning from men. He was learning from God, but he still had to grow and learn. So if he had forgotten who he was when he was born, like the rest of us do, when did he first know that he was the promised Messiah? And when did he know that he would have to die? That's the question. And that's what I think we learned. Yeah, I think he knew that he was the Messiah. Fairly early on, when he's 12 years old in the temple, he says, "I must be about my Father's business." He knew he was the Son of God very early on. The Spirit was with him. God was with him. He was taught by his Father his whole life. He knew who he was. He knew he was the Son of God. I think when he went to get baptized, he knew that he was the Messiah. But he didn't understand that his mission was to die until the 40 days fast in the wilderness. He was baptized and he went into the wilderness for 40 days so that the Father could instruct him on what his mission was. He knew he was the Messiah. Now he had to learn what that meant. He had to learn what was expected, what he was going to be doing. And that's when he first knew that he was going to die. Not just that he was going to die, but that he was going to have to be killed. He was going to be surrendering himself to the Jews. And after that point, we read many times, and we'll see this as we read through the Gospels, that he keeps talking, my time is not yet come. He avoids Jerusalem at times. He avoids the Pharisees because his time and he knew it was not yet time for him to die. And he was waiting for it. Now, I will also say that I don't think he understood the extent of the pain that he was going to be experiencing until he got into the garden, which we'll talk about a little more when we get that far. But he had to learn. He had to progress just like the rest of us. And even though he had a leg up in the race because he was the Son of God, he still had to go through all the stages that we did. He was still an infant. He grew. He had to learn how to walk. He had to learn everything that we do. And while it was easier for him, while he learned, he progressed quickly and he learned quickly. And even by the time he was 12, he knew more than any of the learned men, any of the scholars among the Jews. He still had to progress. And I do think that it wasn't until this time in the wilderness that he understood what his true mission was, what he was going to be doing, what he had to do. I just wanted to share that. And now I end this here, and in our next videos we'll get back into the Gospels. So I will see you there.